Hey guys, and welcome back to Chapter 30 of Caraval. The crooked halls of the Serpent felt shorter than Scarlet remembered. Already, she and Count D'Arcy were on the 4th floor, right outside her door. There were so many ways her plan could go wrong. The Count held her glass key, but he looked down at her before placing it in the lock. Scarlet, I want you to know, this wasn't how I intended things to be between us. What happened in those tunnels? That wasn't me. His eye met hers, far gentler than the way he'd looked at her in the hat shop. For a moment, she could almost see something beneath his over-polished appearance, as if it was just another type of coat he wore for show, and in reality, he was as trapped as she was. This marriage is very important to me. The thought of losing you made me go a little mad. By the time we were in the tunnels, I wasn't thinking clearly. But things will be different once we're married. I'll make you happy, I promise. With his free hand, the Count brushed the silver lock of hair from her face, and for a dreadful moment, Scarlet feared he was going to lean down and kiss her. It took every ounce of strength she'd gained this last week, not to run or cringe. I believe you, Scarlet said, though no words could have been further from the truth. She knew what happened in the tunnels could drive people to madness, twist their fear to make them do things, or allow things they might not normally. But even if he had kept her safe from this point on, and never lifted a finger against her, no universe existed where Count Nicholas D'Arcy would ever make Scarlet happy. Not when the only person she wanted to be with was Julian. Fear clutched her insides as the Count opened the door to her room. Again, she thought of all the ways her plan could go wrong. She could have misread Julian. Julian could have misread her. Her father could come back and listen on the other side of the door. She'd heard of such deplorable things happening. Her palms grew sweaty as she followed the Count into the heated chamber. The massive bed, which had looked so inviting the first time she'd seen it, now looked like a silent threat. Its 4 wooden posters made her think of a cage. She imagined the Count drawing the curtains and trapping her inside. She glanced at the wardrobe, hoping Julian would appear from the hidden door on the other side, or possibly burst out from inside. It was large enough to hold a person, but the doors were shut, and they remained that way. It was only Scarlet, and the Count, and the bed. Now that it was just the two of them, the Count moved differently. His overbred sophistication was completely gone, replaced with clinical precision, as if this were a business matter he needed to wrap up. He took off his gloves first, dropping them on the floor. Then he began undoing the buttons of his waistcoat, creating tiny pops that made Scarlet want to retch. She couldn't do this. Watching her father hurt Julian, Scarlet had finally understood what Julian had been trying to tell her in the tunnels earlier. She had grown up thinking her father's abuse had been her fault, the result of what happened when she made a mistake. But now she could clearly see. Her father was responsible. Nobody deserved his punishments. This was wrong too. When she'd kissed Julian, it had felt right. Two people choosing to give tiny, vulnerable parts of themselves to each other. That's what Scarlet wanted. That's what she deserved. No one else had the right to decide this for her. Yes, her father had always treated her like a possession, but she was not a thing to be bought or sold. Before, Scarlet had always felt as if she didn't have choices, but now she was starting to realize that she did. She just needed to be bold enough to make the difficult ones. Another pop. The Count had moved onto the buttons of his shirt, and he was looking at Scarlet as if he were getting ready to take off her damp gown as well and complete this transaction. It's chilly in here, don't you think? Scarlet grabbed the fireplace poker and stoked the logs, watching the fire skip over the metal until it turned shades of brilliant orange-red. The color of bravery. I think you've stoked it enough. The Count placed a firm palm on her shoulder. Scarlet spun around and aimed the red-hot poker at his face. Don't touch me. Sweetheart. He appeared only mildly surprised, and not nearly as frightened as she would have liked. We can take things slowly if you want, but you should put that down before you injure yourself. I can manage not to hurt myself. Scarlet inched the fireplace rod closer, stopping right below his bright green eye. But you might not be so lucky. Don't move or breathe a word unless you want a scar on your cheek that matches Julian's. The Count's breathing hitched, yet his voice was unnervingly even as he said, I don't think you realize what you're doing, sweetheart. Stop calling me that. I'm not yours, and I'm very aware of my actions. Now get on the bed. Scarlet motioned with the poker, but already its red tip was losing colour. She had thought she'd tie him to the bed, but there was no way it would work. The minute she set down her weapon, he would be upon her, and despite her threats, Scarlet didn't know if she could bring herself to use it. I know you're frightened, the Count said calmly, but if you stop it is whatever you're doing, I'll forget this ever happened, and no harm will be done. Harm? The elixir of protection. The vial she'd bought in the tent at the Castillo had slipped her mind, but it was still in the pocket of her enchanted gown. She just needed to get to the wardrobe. Back up all the way against the bedposts. Scarlet backed away as he did what he was told. Then she bolted for the wardrobe. The Count leaped up the moment she turned, but Scarlet was already opening the wooden doors. With a loud tumble, Julian fell out. His skin was grey and bleeding. Scarlet's heart cracked. What is he doing here? The Count froze long enough for her to reach inside and grab the elixir. She could do nothing for Julian unless she took care of Darcy first. Scarlet ripped the top of the bottle and splashed its contents all over the Count. The spray smelled of daisies and urine. The Count choked and sputtered. What is this? He dropped to his knees as he tried to grab Scarlet, but he looked like an infant attempting to catch a bird. The elixir worked fast, dimming his reflexes to a clumsy crawl. You're making a mistake. He continued wilting to the floor as Scarlet rushed to Julian's side. This is exactly what legend wants. The Count slurred, lips going numb like the rest of his body. Your father told me the history of your grandmother and legend. I have no idea who he is. The Count cut a drooping eye to Julian. But you're playing right into Legend's hands. He brought you to this isle to destroy our marriage, to ruin your life. Well, then it seems he's failed, Scarlet said. From where I'm standing, it looks as if Legend has done me a favor. Julian's eyes fluttered open as Scarlet helped him up from the floor, and her ex-fiancé finished crumbling to the ground. Don't be too sure about any of that, the Count mumbled. Legend doesn't do anyone favors.